My topic is impact of emotional well-being on student success. So first, I have to tell you this topic should really take at least a half-day workshop. We're going to try and do it in an hour, which is very challenging, but we'll do our best. And I also would like you to participate. I don't believe in lecturing at people. I think we learn better and we can discuss things and learn that way. So let me ask all of you first, how many of you are parents? Okay, that's all of you. How many of you are educators? How many of you are educators and parents? Okay, so every parent should have their hand up because all parents are educators, right? Even if you don't have a degree or certificate in education, you are an educator. Okay, so since all of you are educators, what do you think is the definition of emotional well-being? And you can just tell me. Yes.
Having self-confidence.
That's part of it, yes. Anything else? Yes.
Knowing that you're being validated.
Yes.
Being acknowledged.
Exactly. What else? Yes.
Feeling like you belong.
Feeling like you belong. Okay. At peace. Yes. Okay. Does that mean you're happy all the time? No, not necessarily. But it means you can be content even if you're not happy. So the scientific definition is awareness, understanding, and acceptance of our feelings, okay? But there's a lot that needs to be done for us to get to that stage, especially for young people. Adults have tools, they have experience, they have faith, at least most of us, alhamdulillah. So we have things to rely on, we have resources. Young people, children and adolescents may not have those resources. And it's up to us then as adults to help them acquire them and also to recognize when they're having a problem. So when we have, I don't like any of these colors they gave me. Never mind. Okay, so when we are in a state of emotional well-being, we have the ability to cope, okay? So we have coping skills. And what do we need to cope with? Think of a teenager or a child.
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure, okay? So relationships. And excuse my handwriting, it was never good, and I don't think it ever will be. Okay. Daily stressors. What are daily stressors in a child's life?
Family problems.
Okay, so we have family problems, school, yes.
The bullying.
Bullying, exactly. What else? So, just like adults, they have stressors. We tend to think that a child's life is easy. It's not. Maybe it was 150 years ago, but nowadays a child's life is almost as stressful as an adult. Okay, so for children it would be school. Okay, having to study, tests, exams, things that happen unexpectedly. Whether they're good events or bad events, they do affect us and they are stressors. So for adults, one of the highest stressors is getting married, buying a house, because there's so many decisions involved. So even if it's a good event, it's stressful. Okay, how many of us have bought a car and said, oh, I wish I hadn't bought this one, that one would have been better. Or even a house. Well, now I think the neighborhood isn't that great after all. But so even if it's a good event, it can be stressful. A new baby is stressful, although it's one of the most wonderful things in the world. But it's stressful not only to the adults in the family, but also to the children, because they have to adjust to having someone new in the family. Okay, so what are our basic needs, or a child's basic needs?
Food, clothes, shelter. Safe environment.
Okay, so I have them a little differently, because these are what we need for strong or healthy emotions. We have to have adequate sleep. Okay, sleep deprivation in children and teenagers is a huge problem, especially with modern technology. As those of you who were in the previous session, and those of you who have children, and those of you who are teachers, you know how much time is wasted on being on their phone, gadgets, whatever else they're using, right? So, sleep, I don't know if you can see it. If you want, I'll just say it. I don't have to write it. If you're taking notes, that's fine. Nutrition, healthy food. That is, you know, most of us, alhamdulillah, have food. Very few of us have a lack of food. It's just that we make the wrong choices. And children have to be taught what choices are best. The best way to do that is simply not to have unhealthy food in the house. Okay, so when I decide to go on a diet, which is every few months, okay, so I try not to buy any junk food, which I love, right? So if it's in the house, I'm going to eat it. If it's not there, it's too much trouble to get in the car and go and get it. So I'm not going to eat. So for children, it's our role as adults, whether it's as a school or as parents, not to have unhealthy choices. So if all they have is fruit, for example, they may not eat it in rebellion for 3, 4, 5 days. Eventually, when they realize there's no candy, there's no other junk stuff, they will eat the fruit. We had a revolution in our house when we switched from white bread to whole wheat bread, and this was in 1979. Okay, our children they went berserk. We're not going to eat this, fine, you can live without bread, right? 2 days later, everybody was eating it. So it's what you provide. Okay, so moving on, what is another way of saying emotional well-being? How would you describe a person who has emotional well-being? How would you recognize that? Behavior? Yes.
Someone who's able to control their emotions.
Right. Okay, what is another term for? Okay, so basically we say that someone is well adjusted, right? Because they know how to deal with situations. Okay? They don't necessarily have to be happy and smiling all the time, but they behave in a way that corresponds to whatever situation they're facing. So they are well adjusted. Another word for it is balance. And that is something we as Muslims are taught, you know, the middle path. We have to be balanced. We can't go, you know, be very, very happy or very, very sad. There's somewhere in between where, yes, we acknowledge that we're sad, but we also keep on doing what we need to do. So that part of being balanced is how you can tell that someone is emotionally well or emotionally healthy. So what are the signs of a student, say, since this is our setting, who is not well adjusted, who is having problems? What kind of signs would you see in the classroom? I'm sure a lot of you can tell me more about this since I'm not a teacher.
They cry a lot sometimes.
They cry?
Sometimes they don't behave and study.
Okay, how old, what age are you talking about?
Little kids.
Little kids. So we're going to break it down into young. I want to put here, I guess, adolescent. And they're a little different, right, how they behave. So young children and adolescents. So here you're saying crying,
Crying, not eating sometimes.
not eating.
They're not eating.
Okay.
Not,
Hitting
not
sometimes.
Hitting, yes. Okay, so being aggressive. Okay.
Lack of concentration.
Okay, no focus. Okay, no focus. But that can also happen here, right?
Oversleeping or
I beg your pardon?
oversleeping.
In the classroom?
Yeah.
Oh, sleeping in the classroom, okay. I've seen college students do that in college, right? Okay. What else?
They sleep a lot. Big people, they sleep a lot. And they're not good at emotion.
Right. Okay. So, yes.
They get mad.
Anger, and that can be here and here, or just here?
Both.
Both. Okay. Anger,
Withdrawn.
withdrawn, and this is, it can also be on both sides, right? So I'm just going to do this.
Maybe your comments.
You can hear comments about it, right? Okay, so there are actually a lot of them. Children who move a lot in class. They are also, they're overactive, and it can be, again, here or there. Like kids who are always bothering the person sitting next to them. They can be irritable. And then leading up to suicide is cutting. Cutting is very, very common, unfortunately, among teenagers especially. Okay, yes, you have something to say?
Negative image of themselves, whether it be academic, physical.
Okay, low self-esteem, okay. So we have low self-esteem. Okay, and that manifests how in the classroom? How do you see that in the classroom? How do you know that someone has low self-esteem?
Somebody who gets really good scores, doesn't
Mhm.
seem to think it's ever good enough.
Not good
Or
enough.
someone who can do better,
Right,
just assumes they won't do well, so they just give up right away.
yes.
Or, you know,
Absolutely.
trying to fit in
Absolutely.
with the crowds.
Yes. Sorry, yes. Sister.
Also, when you have a student that keeps their head down a lot,
Ah,
they drag their feet, their clothes.
okay, so they're trying to disappear, right? They're trying to disappear, exactly. Okay, so other things I have on here, you covered actually most of them. A red flag is always what? Unfinished assignments, not turning in homework, being bored or appearing to be bored. Usually it's because they have something else on their mind. So when I was also doing school counseling, I would ask the student, is it because the material is too easy or is it because it's too difficult? And either way, they can become bored because they're not catching on, they're not reaching them. So sometimes it just takes a different way of giving them the information so that either it becomes more interesting or it becomes easier. So whether it's too hard or too easy can lead to boredom. The other thing is if you have this blank stare, it could be that they have a lot on their mind, something's going on at home, or with another student, or with another teacher, and so they're worried. Just like we as adults, we worry, and sometimes people will be talking to us and we really don't hear anything that they said because we're thinking about something else. So this happens to children as well. It is not a sign of disrespect. It is a sign that there's something going on in that child's life that they are either unable or unwilling to share. So that awareness that something else is going on, we have to dig deeper. Okay, so after in addition to suicidal ideation and cutting, some of the things that happen are eating disorders. You have, especially among girls, you may have anorexia. Everybody familiar with anorexia? Where they don't want to gain an ounce of weight, right? And they keep losing weight because they don't eat. Or bulimia, where they eat and throw up, again, not to gain weight. Or simply overeating, like, you know, people when they're sad or depressed, they may turn to food, or they turn away from food completely. There are some, and then there's it can escalate to risky behavior, like a 14-year-old who takes his father's car without permission and has an accident. That's risky behavior. Or climbs out of the window at night. Or girls who will do things that are unacceptable. Risky behavior. And it happens. We can't close our eyes and say, not in my community. It happens in every single community, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. Drugs and alcohol. Such easy access. When I ask young people, well, where do you get it? Everywhere. It's there. I don't know where it is. They know where it is. Very easy access. It's very tempting because if you're in emotional pain and you have no tools and skills, or you don't know who to go to, then you don't want to feel. So when you don't want to feel, you turn to something that'll make you numb. Alcohol, drugs will do that for you. It does it very well, okay? It's not a solution, but it'll make you feel numb. The sister who was here earlier was talking about this misuse of technology. And again, it's to feel numb because it's an escape from pain, from sadness, from not being heard, from just not being recognized, not being respected. So you find an outlet where you have a skill, right? So all these games, they make you feel good because you're winning, right? So I do the crossword and Sudoku every morning, and it makes you feel good because when I solve it, but if I stayed on it like for 6 hours, like some of these kids do, I'd probably get sick. So I know my limits, they do not. And that's why we have to guide them through this. So there are some differences between girls and boys. Girls may become withdrawn, boys may become aggressive. And again, the age difference between young kids and adolescents. Okay, any more comments or questions on this before I move on? Okay. And I think you all already know this. It's just putting it in a different perspective. Okay, so I'm going to talk about depression and anxiety. Can someone tell me the difference between depression and anxiety?
Anxiety is like worry,
Okay,
and depression is like feeling sad.
okay, but depressed people do worry too. Okay, so it's the outward manifestation of it, okay? It's actually the same thing. So if we put anxiety here, and depression on this side, they're actually both on the same continuum. Okay, so this is someone who's severely depressed. it'd be here. This is someone who is highly anxious, okay? So anxiety can manifest itself in panic attacks. It can be, as you said, worrying excessively. And these people usually have a lot of energy. And so that's the real main difference between anxiety and depression. Depression is usually low energy, whether it's physical, emotional, or both. So, but it's the same thing, and we treat them the same way because the cause is the same. They're stressors. And in both cases, they don't see a solution. Okay, so a person who's highly anxious is stuck. Yes?
Sometimes kids, they don't say that they're anxious or sad or whatever. They say my stomach hurts.
Absolutely.
Like, I notice when I'm with some kids, it's like, oh, my stomach hurts. But it's really, I'm anxious because I don't want to go to this activity or I don't want to go here or something else.
Right. So older kids get headaches, younger kids get stomach issues, right? Because we will listen to them if they say it hurts. And because we as adults respond to physical pain, because there's not something we can do about, right? So if your stomach hurts, maybe we'll give you chicken soup, or, you can go lie down for a bit, or if you have a headache, we'll give you Tylenol, ibuprofen, whatever. And we think we've solved the problem, but in many cases we haven't. So it's not always a physical issue, but it manifests as a physical issue. Adults who are under continued stress develop illness, okay? In men, it's heart attacks, strokes, sometimes kidney problems. In women, it's more headaches all over, fibromyalgia, like just pain, and it's very, very common. So if we don't take care of stress, it does manifest as a physical symptom. So when a child tells you, my stomach is hurting, yes, it means he or she is stressed, unless of course they've eaten something they shouldn't or they have the flu. But if there's no apparent reason, then it's because adults have the same problem. It's just that because our bodies are more developed, it may take longer for us to get the symptoms. Cancer is a very, of course some of it is genetic, but in many cases cancer is caused by repeated stress, for which there is no apparent solution. Who said that? Yeah,
I'm sorry, I said.
no, I believe that. Yeah, I've seen it, okay? I have seen it. Okay, so anxiety and depression can be treated, but it doesn't help to treat them without finding out what the underlying cause is. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples from my work. At one point I had a 5-year-old child, not my child, but a school child, who was actually very aggressive. And he would hit people in his classroom, and he would always pick on the smaller kids, right? And every day. So he was referred to me, and with a 5-year-old, you can't really talk about problems. So I had him draw a couple of pictures. So he drew a picture of the school, and he drew a picture of his home. The school picture was very nice. It had, he even drew the school bus. There were windows, there were kids playing, etc. The house, I'm a terrible artist, but I'll show you what he did with the house. So if you imagine I'll put a gabled roof, okay? Oh, it actually had no windows. It had a door, no windows, not a single window. Then he drew the cars. his father's car, imagine this is a Porsche, right? And the mother's car was a van, okay? It wasn't a Porsche, but anyway. He drew these two. He went like this on his father's car. He kept doing this in black. What did that tell me? Guess. Abusive father. He wasn't only, we found out later, he wasn't only abusive to the child, he was abusive to the mother. So then the question comes up, how do we take care of this? You know, you can send the child to therapy, the parents will accept that. Is the father going to accept to go to therapy? No. So it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of, sometimes you have to involve the community in order to rectify that kind of situation. But it's much more common than we think it is, unfortunately. Okay? Another example, I had I think she was a 12-year-old, and she was failing miserably in school. Very smart girl. She wasn't doing her work. So I sat down with her for a couple of sessions, and then I asked her, give me your schedule, you know, when you get home, what do you do? I do this with adults too, because they can't remember what they do every day. So I asked her, what do you do when you go home? When do you do your homework? Well, she goes home, she helps her mother, then every single night they have guests. Her room was being used as the babysitting room where all the little kids go. People go home at 11 or later. Before she goes to bed, she's responsible for cleaning her room that's been destroyed, absolutely. When is she gonna do her homework? She comes to school exhausted. Okay, again, when the school tried to address this with the parents, what did the parents do? Even worse, they took the child out of school. They took her to a different school because this school wasn't understanding. Okay, so we have to be very careful. Some parents do listen, some are unable to for whatever reason, whether it's cultural, whether they feel bad about themselves, whether we don't know the reason. Yes. It means that they're not good parents, right? It has nothing to do with that. We don't get a class in parenting, you know, when parents are expecting a child. How many of them actually go to a parenting class before they have a child? Usually they don't go until they start having problems. So, but if we had that training, if we knew what to expect, how to deal with young children, how to deal with adolescents, how to deal, it would make life so much easier, but it's not a requirement, right? It's not, it hasn't been made a requirement before having a child. Okay, so some of the things that could be happening in a child's life, the stressors that we were talking about, could be a new school, could be a new teacher, could be a teacher that they're not comfortable with, could be a new baby in the family, could be a parent's divorce, remarriage, a death or an illness in the family. We always think of these as adult problems, but they really impact the children. They feel them very strongly because they don't have the coping skills we do as adults. They don't have that. And also, we don't include them in the process. So when somebody dies, for example, a grandfather or a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle, we don't talk to the children. I'm talking now as a parent, right? We don't talk to the children about the impact of the loss. That it's okay to be sad. It's okay to miss them. And we're all sad together. So most parents don't know how to include their children in the process. And that's what causes problems. And that brings me to a client I had in his mid-40s. who had severe anxiety and panic attacks. So he would wake up in the morning, horrible panic attack. They'd rush him to the emergency room. He thought he was going to die, and this happened several times. So the medical doctor referred him to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist gave him anti-anxiety medication, which helped a little, but he was still having this, I'm going to die. Every morning he would wake up, I'm going to die. Finally, the psychiatrist referred him for therapy. So I got to see him. What did we discover? Previously he hadn't even thought about that, because we tend to forget childhood events, especially if they're negative. We don't want to remember them. So what had happened was when he was 5, someone across the street from where they lived had a 9-month-old baby who died all of a sudden, okay? Then, a few months later, a 6-year-old boy got hit by a car in their neighborhood and died. The parents never talked to him about it. They talked about it thinking that he was asleep, or he couldn't hear, or he couldn't understand. They never addressed it with him. Very, very important. I mean, these are huge events, especially if you know the people who died, right? So for a child, it's devastating. They never addressed it with him. So once we did the therapy, once he recognized where this was coming from, his panic attacks went away, and he stopped the medication. He was able to stop the medication. He didn't need it anymore, because he was still reacting to the fear of death from a child's point of view. As an adult, you know you're going to die at some point, right? So you can deal with that. But from a child's mind, you can't. So that's what happens when we don't address issues, when children are having problems when they're young and they're adults. If we ignore them, they're not going to go away. Faith by itself doesn't do it. Like we have an 18-year-old who, yes, he believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he goes to the masjid, he prays, he fasts, he does everything, but he has either anxiety or depression, and it's not helping him cope. There's something going on. And prayer by itself does not solve everything, okay? We have to find a remedy. How am I doing on time? How long is this session? Can somebody look at it? Oh, wow. Okay, good. So we're almost done. Okay, so, yes, go ahead.
I find that a lot of parents are young, so you have the young parents having babies,
Right.
and they're lost. So they have babies, and you'll find, especially among the Muslim and non-Muslim, when these parents are 18, 19, in their 20s, their
Right.
kids get totally lost. And you find that the parents are still,
They're children.
they're still children, so you have children having children,
Right.
and I find that to be a big issue.
Okay, so this is a question, I don't know if you all heard it, about very young parents. When they have young children, it's very hard for them to cope, especially if they have 1 and 2 and 3. Somebody else's hand, yes?
And you also have adults, middle-aged adults, that have never dealt with their own issues.
Absolutely.
And their children can be 20 years old
Right.
and still picking up the same thing that parents instilled in them.
Absolutely.
It didn't even have to be a religious thing. It
Right.
can be because I grew up depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I now pass that to my child, who
Right.
could very well not be a depressed kid, because that's how I always am at home.
Right.
And have not dealt with reality or what's really going on with me. I could pass those things on to my kid.
Absolutely, but also there is a genetic component to both anxiety and depression. How it tends to run in families. Yes, let me just finish that. Just like diabetes, just like kidney problems, heart problems, etc. However, it can be treated, and not necessarily with medication. Sometimes medication is needed, but with exercise, with acknowledgement, with knowing that you have an issue and wanting to do something about it. And that's your point, is that if I'm depressed, then it's okay for my child to be depressed, right?
But then sometimes, is it that, I'm not saying that genetics doesn't have a big part, because it is.
Right.
Because it does, but what about that kid that is different than all the other kids in your house? If you got 5 kids, say you got one over here, like just bouncing off the walls, happy all the time, you know, just happy. But because you, as the parent, have your, you know, the emotional instability, and your other 3 kids have the emotional instability, that one that's usually bouncing off the walls could just say, well, you know, maybe I need to tone it down because they are not as bubbly as I am. That's all I was saying. 'Cause
Oh, yeah,
sometimes-
absolutely.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not about it being a genetic. Sometimes it's about your culture, your
It's about
environment.
fitting in, right? It's about what's around you, exactly. So, and that's where the school can be helpful to the family. Because if you have, especially if you have more than one child from the same family and you notice there are differences, then you can find out what's going on. So it takes like detective work, and it also takes referral. Like, I don't know in Islamic schools, and in public school you can refer to a psychologist or a therapist. It depends on the Islamic school what the mechanism is, but definitely you should refer, you know, children who appear to need help for whatever reason, whether it's from a problem in the school or a problem at home. Other things that happen that affect a child are, somebody mentioned it earlier, being bullied, whether it's at home or at school. You can get bullied at home by an older sibling, by a cousin, by a neighbor, by anyone, right? So we can't discount that. Bullying does not only happen at school. An older sibling moves away, either to go to college, to get married, to get a job. That leaves a blank for that child. They're going to miss their sibling, so they may go through a period of feeling loss and grief because an older sibling has moved away. A parent loses a job. That affects their economic and social standing in the community. That will affect the child, even if it's temporary. So again, the remedy is for people to talk about it, to reassure the children that there will be a remedy, that the adults are taking care of it, because the child cannot fix it, and they worry. Children are great warriors. They do it very, very well, okay? Another thing is that unrealistic expectations, whether it's from the parent or from the teacher, we have to know what each child is capable of and then help them move on to the next level. Sometimes we expect too much too soon, right? Comparing one child to another, like parents do it all the time. Well, look at your brother, he does blah, blah, blah. Why can't you do it? Well, because I'm not him, and I don't want to do it, right? So we have to actually understand our children, know them, and know what we can expect of them. And that goes for teachers as well. So I'm sure you all have those skills to recognize what each child is capable of and just to help them improve. So this is an acronym that I really love. And those of you that, and it is okay, what does aloha mean? Okay, but it's an acronym for ask, listen, offer help, and ask again, okay? to respond, whether it's a child or an adult. If you notice that they're struggling with something, you need to ask them. You need to listen to what they say. You need to offer a solution or some kind of help. If they accept the help, then go ahead and help them, and then ask again. Because this step, usually we stop here. Okay, so your neighbor needs something, you do it for them, you stop here. You don't ask, you don't go down to this and say, are you okay now? Do you need something more? Because you should really ask again and start again here. It's a continuous loop. It doesn't actually end. So that's what we do with our children, whether we're parents or students, right? That's why we have tests. Have they learned anything, right? We have to evaluate. We have to keep asking, listening, offering help, and actually providing the help. So when we are talking as parents or as adults to children, we need to really not judge them, because after all, a child is going to have childish thinking. It's not going to have adult thinking, right? So we have to accept that. Don't assume something, and we do that even as adults with other adults. We assume that you're telling me this because you have bad intentions, or you want to hurt me, or you think too much of yourself, or whatever it is, right? So when we make assumptions, then we're already not listening, because it's what's in our head, not in that person's head. Be trustworthy, okay? What do I mean by that? Keep their secrets, thank you. A lot of adults have the idea that a child's secrets are to be shared. That is not true. What will happen if you share their secret? They won't trust you anymore, right? So when they have a problem, they will not come back to you because they don't trust you. So the trust is very important. So you have to keep their secrets. Okay, and you have to also understand that being an authority figure in a child's life makes it difficult for them to reach out to you, because there's a discrepancy, not only in size, but in stature, who you are, what kind of authority do you have. So if I see my parents doing something I don't like, it's not easy for me to say, you know, you really shouldn't be doing this, or why did you do that? Because he's my father or my mother. I can't. Same thing with a teacher. So we have to remember that we have authority over these children. So we need to come down, take a step down, so that we're on the same level. Okay. So with young children, you literally get down or raise them up. Like my kids, when they were little, they lived on the kitchen table, on top of the washer, on top of the dryer, wherever I was, because that's where we were at eye level. Okay? If they were down here and I was talking to them, they actually couldn't see my face, right? So with adolescents, I remember when my kids were teenagers, I would go and sit on their bed to talk to them. If I was standing, again, there'd be no eye contact. Sometimes I would sit on the floor if they were lying down, because again, there'd be no eye contact, right? So that's very important. And that gives the child or adolescent a feeling of being respected, so that helps with their self-esteem. They are cared for, not just physically, but also as human beings. You know, they're on an equal footing with the parent or the teacher. Okay, so we talked about this already. So what needs to change? So if we identify a problem, whether it's in the school or at home, then we need to follow up. And that's the hardest part for both the school and the parents. Because unless there's, visible abuse, you can't really do anything as a school to make that change. But you can refer for counseling, and you can make it a condition that a child has to go to counseling. So if it's a young child, you would refer it to a child therapist they have their own toolbox of how to work with young children. Or the better one is actually play therapy for the family. It has very good, quick results if you find a therapist who does that, because they'll include the whole family, the parents, the siblings, and they use play therapy to solve whatever issue there is. For adolescents, individual therapy, of course, you need to start there, but there also needs to be family therapy. I've done both, individual and family. When you get to see the family as a whole, you immediately identify what the problem is. I had a family of 5 who came to my office once, 5 or 6, 5. And it was very, very interesting. One of the girls, who was probably around 13, she picked the best seat in the room before her parents got a chance to sit down. So who calls the shots in that family? That 13-year-old, right? So we had to do a lot of work for her to see that her place was not the boss. It's very interesting to work with families, but it's also much faster if you can work with the family as a whole, if you can get them to come. So the hardest thing is getting the father to come, because he's the head of the family. There are a lot of cultural issues, but not only with Muslim families, with non-Muslims, it's the same thing. For many years, about 95% of my clients were non-Muslim. They have the same issues. So, fix my daughter, fix my wife, fix my son. Not hear anything wrong with him, right? So then I would say, okay, I need you to come and help me fix your son. Okay, I wouldn't use those words, but I need you to come and help me, because I need your help. So that way they would come in, and eventually they would see that the problem was not just the son, but he was contributing to the problem. So it's tough. Okay, so how long is therapy usually? If you send someone to therapy, the minimum should be between 6 and 12 sessions. That's if it's regular talk therapy. There are other kinds of therapies, but the standard is 6 to 12 sessions, preferably weekly, because if there's a gap, you don't get the benefits. And then finally, there may have to be medication, even if it's for a short time. Medication may not be for the child, it may be for the parent. Like if the mother is suffering from postpartum depression, she's just had a baby, she's extremely depressed, there is no way she can take care of her kids unless she's in some kind of treatment, whether talk therapy or medication, usually a combination of the two. But it's not for life. It's for usually a few months until the problem is solved and they can move on. So there is hope, but it's very important. The job of people like me who are educators, who see children on a daily basis, who probably see them more than their parents do. Because guess what? When they go home, if they're teenagers, each one goes to his or her room. They're saying they're doing their homework, but who knows what they're doing. If the parents have several children, the mother is probably busy fixing dinner, doing whatever. The father may or may not be at home. So you actually, as educators, get to see them for a much longer period than their parents do. So you can observe if there are any problems, okay? And then finally, if we as adults and educators and parents have an issue, we need to get help. Okay, I think time is up, right? Yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.